A monotonous voice echoed non-stop inside our main character's head. It was filled with nothing but harsh words, blame, and cruel reminders of his past. It kept replaying how he'd been labeled a worthless kid ever since he was little. His classmates were absolutely brutal, constantly harassing him and roasting him with zero chill. They were always cooking up new insults and taunts, and they jumped on every chance they got to humiliate him in front of everyone. Back then, the boy would just stand there grimly with his head down. He'd lower his gaze and just listen in complete silence, just swallowing all the insults and the pain, because he felt completely helpless and knew he couldn't change a single thing about it. But then out of nowhere, one of the guys who had been ruthlessly tearing into him got rocked with a massive punch to the face. That single hit shut down all the mockery and left everyone standing there in total shock. "Brother Ben," a voice dripping with pure rage, suddenly snapped at the dudes nearby, demanding to know what was going on. He asked them what kind of insane garbage they thought they were spewing. Those absolute clowns actually believed, without a second thought, all the rumors and lies spread by others. They didn't even bother trying to figure out the truth, mostly because they couldn't be bothered to think for themselves. They had no desire to understand, and low-key they didn't want to. Little Yuanzi was genuinely moved by this sudden rescue. And this unexpected kindness was a lot to take in. He couldn't hold back the wave of emotions, and completely overwhelmed by the support, he just lowered his head and cried his eyes out. Then his older brother took his hand, firmly leaned in, and promised him with total confidence that he would never leave him alone again. From now on, he'd always be there to protect him. In response, the younger brother just managed a quiet smile, still shaken from everything that had just happened. A single lonely tear slowly traced its way down his cheek, mixing with his relief. Holding hands, our main character felt a sense of warmth and security, truly believing that as long as his brother was with him, no challenge or problem could ever break him. But in that completely unexpected moment, their hands suddenly slipped apart, which felt incredibly strange and out of nowhere. It left both of them baffled and a little freaked out by the bizarre event. Yuanzi's face was a mask of pure confusion, and a deep loneliness washed over him, his eyes shimmering with sadness. His entire expression screamed helplessness in the face of the unknown. His older brother was walking away from him without a single word or explanation, leaving young Yuanzi behind. He was left all alone, drowning in a mix of shock, anxiety, and total confusion. The young man immediately bolted after him, trying to catch up. He reached out his arms, desperate to grab hold of his older brother, feeling a terrifying fear of losing him. And he had this powerful urge to close the distance between them. He pleaded with him, begging him not to go, and not to leave him alone with all his fear and anxiety. But Ben just calmly replied that he believed in his strength, and that he had what it takes to face anything on his own. Waking up drenched in a cold sweat, Yuanzi just laid in bed, replaying the awful nightmare and feeling his heart still pounding in his chest from the fear. He tried to make sense of what it all meant. Back in high school, he had started developing this bizarre condition. The gist of it was that his brain would uncontrollably dig up old memories and moments from his past, even stuff he thought he had forgotten ages ago. His consciousness was basically a supercomputer stuck on overdrive, absorbing and analyzing every memory, every fact, and every piece of information it came across. It didn't matter if the info was useful or totally random, which just created pure chaos in his head. As a result, his brain's control over his body was low-key insane. Every single movement, every reflex, and even the smallest actions were all hardwired to his brain's hyperactive state, forcing his body to obey without question. The biggest drawback to this condition was that whenever his symptoms flared up, our hero would be hit with an unbelievably intense and unbearable headache that felt like it was tearing through his mind. The doctors couldn't figure out the exact cause of his illness, but thanks to some special medicine his mom brought back from overseas, his overall condition gradually leveled out. Then one day he heard a knock on the door, followed by a shout, letting him know a package had arrived for him. The young man was hesitant for a few seconds, but his curiosity won out, and he decided to go see who or what had delivered it. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the fact that lately, the medicine's effects had become almost unnoticeable, its grip on his body weakening, and leaving his mind in a state of constant tension and anxiety. Yuanzi started to think his body was slowly building up a tolerance to the drug, which would explain why the medicine just wasn't hitting the same anymore, and why his symptoms were starting to pop up again, more alarming than before. As he left his room, he immediately spotted his aunt, who gave him a warm smile and explained that he should probably come with her to do some shopping. That way they could pick out all the necessary items and groceries together. Without even responding to his aunt's explanation, our hero just gave a silent nod of agreement. He carefully picked up his package and started to check it out, feeling a mix of slight excitement and curiosity. There was no sender information on the box, which immediately set off alarm bells in his head and made him meticulously inspect every single seam and marking, suspiciously trying to figure out if it was some kind of threat. A woman suddenly appeared right behind him, and in that instant our boy felt a sudden wave of fear. He realized things could go south real fast, and that the situation had just become extremely dangerous for him. She gave him a harsh warning, saying she'd break his legs, without a second thought, if he even dared to leave with his aunt. That threat made the young man's heart pound in his chest from fear and uncertainty about his own safety. His grandmother was way past the age of making idle threats, and every single word she spoke felt heavy and serious. No cap, she meant exactly what she said, and there wasn't a hint of a joke in her tone. The young girl tried to explain to her mother that Yuanzi was almost 20 and it was time for him to start meeting some girls. But the problem was he didn't own any decent clothes for the occasion. The lady already knew what this was really about and sternly ordered her daughter to go on an arranged date that very day. She argued that if she didn't get married soon, there would be nobody left to take care of her. The girl shot back that all her previous blind dates had been a total nightmare and a complete waste of time. Even as they were going at it trading verbal jabs, the young man had other plans. He just calmly decided to open his package. He carefully pried open the box, peering inside to get a good look at its contents. He was trying to figure out what exactly had been sent to him and whether some kind of danger was waiting. Pulling out a card, our hero immediately noticed the slick texture of its surface. It felt smooth against his fingers and caught him a little off guard, because even to the touch, this thing felt special. It instantly gave him the vibe of a high-class business card from some exclusive club for the rich, elegant and expensive. It looked like something that was custom-made for people at the top of the social ladder. Our hero carefully tucked the card into his pocket, making sure he didn't mess it up. Then he leaned back over the box, curious to see what else it might be hiding and how its contents would surprise him next. Getting hyped, he pulled a letter out, his heart starting to pound with anticipation. He couldn't help but wonder if he should just rip it open right then and there to see what it said. He knew right away the letter was from Bin, and it was about some upcoming changes. It also mentioned something interesting and special that Bin had prepped for his brother, which low-key got him a little excited. That's when it hit him. They hadn't spoken in a long time, and now this sus card just shows up out of nowhere. So he pulled his phone from his pocket, a flash of irritation hitting him as he tried to understand who sent this and why. He dialed his friend's number and waited, his heart beating just a little bit faster than normal. His mind was already running through every possible scenario for what his friend was about to say or how he'd explain the appearance of this sketchy card. But on the other end of the line, it was Bin's dad who answered, which immediately felt super suspicious since he wasn't expecting anyone but his buddy to pick up. And the guy's tone was dead serious. Yuanji explained he was calling Bin to go over some important business, share some of his thoughts, and just get an update, hoping for a totally normal chat. But Bin's father told him he was at his son's university at that very moment. Then he dropped the bomb his son had completely vanished, which sparked some major concern. It made the whole situation with the card and the letter feel way more urgent and sketchy. The kid had been missing for 2 whole days, so when he and his aunt got the message, they immediately rushed to the location filled with a mix of anxiety and a desperate hope of finding him. In the end, it was an incredibly tough situation to explain because Bin had disappeared under bizarre circumstances. He was last seen in his own dorm room, a fact that only ramped up the anxiety and cast doubt on every single theory they had. When the police finally reviewed the camera footage, things got even weirder. It turned out Bin never left the room, only his roommate was with him. But when the roommate turned away for just a second, the student suddenly vanished, leaving nothing behind but an empty room. Yuanzi listened intently, soaking in every single detail of the story, and he literally couldn't believe what he was hearing, because he knew this kind of thing was pure fiction and couldn't possibly be real. So our MC tried to calm Uncle Lay down, telling him not to freak out and promising he'd get in touch with his grandfather, who just so happened to have a job at the Public Security Bureau, so they could figure out the best way to handle this insane mess. Once the call ended, our guy was just completely out of it for a moment. His mind was a total hurricane of thoughts, making his heart pound in his chest, and he couldn't catch a break just sitting there with his chin in his hand. Our boy started carefully breaking down every single thing that had happened since he woke up, replaying every detail in his head, and trying to make sense of how any of it was even possible. As he dug into his pocket to pull out the business card, he suddenly realized it was freaking gone. A cold chill immediately ran down his spine, because the card just vanishing like that felt super weird and hella suspicious given the circumstances. At this point, that discovery just made him even more pissed off, making him feel like he was trapped in some kind of supernatural craziness, where reality and something else were getting all twisted together. Because of the massive info dump he'd been hit with since that morning, our MC's head was absolutely pounding, and he just couldn't take it anymore. He just slumped against the table, trying to ease the pain a little and just get his thoughts straight. Yuanzi instantly grabbed a bottle of meds and popped the right dose, hoping it would give him some quick relief from the killer migraine that felt like it was splitting his skull open and completely draining him. Then his vision started to get blurry, which made everything 10 times worse, and the pain in his head ramped up to an almost unbearable level. It forced him to grimace, clinging onto the table, just to keep some semblance of balance. Our hero had no idea why any of this was happening, and every new detail just deepened his confusion and shock. His thoughts and memories were like a corrupted hard drive just endlessly cycling in his brain. Then for a second he thought he saw Bin standing right there in front of him, and the words Bin said about his brother definitely being able to handle this echoed in our MC's head. But now he was having some serious doubts. All of a sudden, blood started pouring from the dude's nose, a clear sign that his blood pressure was skyrocketing. Every single drop felt like a warning siren, screaming about the danger his body was in. Grabbing 2 pills in his hand, he dry swallowed them in a single gulp, barely even tasting them, just hoping the medicine would kick in fast, and that this agonizing pain would finally start to fade away. From behind the door, a woman announced that investigators from the Kongyang district had shown up and wanted to speak with him. And bruh, her voice sounded dead serious. It sent a fresh wave of anxiety right through our hero. Our guy had no idea if his brother's colleagues showing up at his door was just some random coincidence, or if there was some hidden reason behind their visit that was about to flip his entire world upside down. The old woman insisted her grandson hadn't done anything wrong, but the officer just played it cool, telling her it was all just standard procedure. He promised everything would be fine, trying to calm her down as she went to get the door. The grandmother told our young MC that some strangers needed to ask him a few questions. Her voice was trembling with a mix of cautious worry and low-key anxiety, but at the same time, she was giving him a threatening look, still not 100% convinced her grandson was an angel. Her words were laced with anger, reflecting her own doubt about whether he was telling the truth. After getting a good look at the visitors at the front door, our MC realized they were his cousin's co-workers. His mind immediately started racing, trying to figure out why in the world they were making a house call. Inviting the guests in, our guy introduced himself, dropping his name with a calm and confident vibe, like he was trying to establish a friendly connection right from the jump. The officer wasted no time asking if Yuanzi knew Lei Yibin and was a bit surprised to learn the two had grown up together. That fact seemed to hit different, highlighting how deep their connection went. Our hero realized his cousin was the captain of the 2nd detachment in the Kongyang district, and if these 3 randos were showing up at his place, it meant his cousin already knew what went down and was making a calculated move. Taking a seat, the officer cut right to the chase. He said he knew that right before he vanished. Bin had mailed a package to his brother, and his voice was dead certain. Like every word was a confirmed fact. Our boy decided to play dumb, acting completely shocked that his friend was missing. His voice even trembled with a bit of fake fear and anxiety. The female officer told her partner Wang Tai not to scare the student, and just asked him to chill, as if they were just having a casual chat. Trying to dial down the tension, our hero replied that the package had just arrived. He mentioned there was no return address on it, which only made the whole situation feel sketchier. He then added that the box was totally empty, which he claimed just made him more confused and suspicious about the whole thing. He knew the black card was long gone. So technically he wasn't really lying. That little mental loophole was all the justification he needed for his story. The officer then stated that our MC was the last person Lei Yibing had contacted. Therefore, they needed to search his room computer and phone for any clues about what happened. Yuanzi agreed immediately, acting like he had nothing to hide, his tone completely calm, without a single shred of fear or doubt about the search. The lead officer gave his team the signal to get to work, and they immediately started executing their orders, moving with a scary amount of precision, totally in sync. The female officer approached our student first, thanking him for his cooperation, and then asked for his phone number in a way that was polite, but also left zero room for argument. Our hero tried to object, saying it was full of, educational information. He immediately started blushing, getting a little embarrassed by his own lame excuse. But the officer assured him she'd only check for stuff related to Lei Yibin. Her calm and professional tone pretty much shut down any further arguments he might have had. The young man then finally asked what exactly had happened to his brother, because he knew that if he didn't ask, it would look super suspicious. Because that would just look sketchy. So he had to play it cool and act all sincere. The guy explained that the student had just been laying on his bed in his dorm room, and then suddenly he just vanished. No one was able to get in touch with him for a solid 24 hours. After that, people finally decided to call the cops. Our boy was already up to speed on all this info, and it seemed like the investigation had hit a dead end. Or maybe this dude was just holding back details, with a dark look like he was hiding something big. The investigator ordered them to call him the second. Our MC found or saw anything at all. He made it clear this wasn't the time for secrets, really driving home how serious the situation was. And for the grand finale, he straight up threatened that the next person to disappear would be Yuanzi himself, and his words just hung in the air, cold and heavy, leaving behind this tense silence and a very real feeling of danger. Our hero had absolutely no clue what that was supposed to mean, but in response, he just thanked the guy for the warning. Trying to low-key hide how amped he was, and making sure not to show any fear. He sat down and just waited for the whole thing to blow over, and for these strangers to finally get out of his house. Feeling both tense and a little relieved, the woman walked over and handed his phone back to our young man, letting him know the inspection was over, her voice trying to sound all calm and soothing. She gave him this wide, friendly smile, trying to make the vibe less awkward. That's when it clicked for our MC that this lady definitely saw something on his phone. She shouldn't have, which made him super uncomfortable, and left him guessing what was going to happen next. The guy gave our MC his business card and told him to call anytime if new info popped up, leaving the door open for them to talk again later. In return, our protagonist asked them to share any intel they got about his brother, and it looked like they agreed, even though you could see a little bit of doubt in their eyes. Grandma was also worried, and kept insisting that they needed to call the missing guy's mom to give her some support, her voice sounding really pushy and just filled with anxiety. The grandson asked her to tell Grandpa everything when he got back and to have him contact his uncle while he was going to go lie down because of a headache, feeling completely wiped and stressed out. The investigator's car was still parked right out front, a constant reminder that strangers were around, keeping the tension high. The man asked if Guan found anything good on the kid's phone. His tone was calm but sharp, waiting for any important detail. She immediately said there was a ton of info he'd be interested in, which definitely piqued his curiosity, wanting to know more. With a dark look, the director ordered her to spill it. His voice was harsh with absolutely zero chill. The woman explained that the student had a lot of hidden files and was actively trying to cover them up, which immediately got the director's attention and made him suspicious. The phone was jam-packed with documents that looked like they were for school, but he also had deep access to a bunch of social media groups, which made the device a total goldmine for analysis. All of the other groups were just related to online games, and the only form of entertainment in his room were a bunch of game consoles. So, yeah, he was kind of a shut-in, and didn't really talk to people much. The guy was not exactly thrilled that his colleague considered this vital information, and he straight up told her to stop digging into other people's personal business, making it crystal clear that she'd crossed a line. But Guanya just didn't get what his problem was. She told him as much and basically called him boring. Her tone was playful, but she was definitely trying to get a reaction out of him. She added that the letter E being sent was hidden behind a flower pot, and the package definitely wasn't empty, which confirmed that there was some crucial info inside. More than likely it contained a character card, but he had no idea what class it was, making its true value a total mystery. With a glass of wine in hand, the man announced that he needed to be back by the following day, unless the young man disappeared before then, and his voice was cold and unyielding. Outside evening had already set in, and the sky was slowly painting itself in a gorgeous palette, going from a soft pink to a deep violet, creating a totally magical atmosphere. Our hero was sitting in front of his monitor, staring intently at the screen, and he slowly began to realize that Bin's disappearance had been carefully planned, and that the mysterious goal of the other party was to get their hands on the black card. It then became clear that the security bureau probably wasn't the only one who suspected that he was holding the card, and that simultaneously, a third party was actively searching for Bin's brother, trying to gain an advantage. His friend decided not to contact the bureau, which meant he didn't trust them one bit. And Yuanzi found himself in a similar spot, unable to trust anyone around him because of the whole situation. The safest option seemed to be telling his cousin everything that had happened, because he was the only person he could trust even a little. But the problem was, our hero couldn't contact him at that moment, and even if he could, he didn't know how to logically explain the mysterious disappearance of the card from his pocket. Suddenly, Jin rushed into his room, not understanding why her nephew was ignoring her calls and messages. His weird behavior was making her confused and anxious. She realized the young man probably wasn't going to answer, which only irritated her more, fueling her anger and her desire to find out the reason for his silence. But as he got up from his desk, he suddenly felt everything go dark in front of his eyes, and the world around him seemed to blur, leaving him in darkness and confusion. Clutching his head, Yuenzi felt an intense pain and was completely confused, not understanding what was happening or why his consciousness was starting to slip. His head started to hurt again, even though he'd already taken his medication, and the pain seemed even more intense than before, forcing him to clutch his temples in desperation. He couldn't think straight anymore. There was only a throbbing pain spreading through his entire body, invading every cell of his consciousness, leaving no room for clear thoughts. His grandmother came to get her daughter, watching her closely. She then grilled him about his blind date, totally expecting him to spill all the tea. He told her it went fine, and that the dude owned both his own house and an apartment. But get this, she was actually ticked off that he was too rich, which low-key left her feeling weird about the whole thing. Meanwhile, back in our hero's room, he was standing in front of the mirror, staring hard at his own reflection and trying to process what was happening to him. He couldn't figure out why his face looked so drained when suddenly his eyes shot wide open in surprise. He saw something in the mirror that he was absolutely not ready for. It instantly hit him with a wave of pure shock and uncertainty. A small black mark had just materialized on his forehead out of thin air. It immediately grabbed his full attention, and his heart started hammering in his chest from a nasty mix of anxiety and surprise. Right under the mark was a thin banner that clearly read 90%, which totally freaked him out. He was forced to seriously think about what it meant, and then it suddenly clicked: this was the Black Moon. The very same one mentioned on the card, and just below it, a progress bar was slowly inching forward, cranking his anxiety levels up to 11. He finally understood that the card hadn't just vanished. Instead, it was just hidden away somewhere inside his own body. He then remembered what his brother had told him, that this discovery would completely flip his entire life upside down. The young man concluded that someone had to be actively hunting for this card. He figured his brother probably yeeted it over to him right before he disappeared, leaving nothing but a massive mystery in his wake. Less than a minute later, the gauge hit 100%, which sent an instant jolt of shock and stress through him. His heart rate went absolutely ballistic from the surprise. The character card had finished reloading, and our hero was hit with a tidal wave of conflicting emotions. His reality had been completely reshaped, opening up possibilities he never even knew existed. A system window suddenly popped up right in front of the kid, displaying all of his character stats in crisp detail. It revealed new data and opportunities, letting him finally get a handle on his own power and potential. To start the window, prompted the player to enter their name so the system could register them as the character's owner. This would allow it to correctly display all the extra data and features. The menu itself was super basic though, and didn't really let him interact with it. For a hot second, Yuanzi actually thought about trying to input some fake info, but he quickly realized that plan had almost zero chance of working. After typing in his name, the window immediately flashed a warning, telling him that using his real name was strictly forbidden. He felt a surge of insecurity and dread, wondering what the consequences would be for breaking the rules like that. The boy stood frozen in the middle of the room, his mind racing as he was lost in thought, trying to come up with a cool nickname that would reflect his personality but also be safe to use. After entering the username he'd chosen, he fell silent, eagerly waiting to see what the system would do next. He watched as new options and possibilities slowly began to materialize right before his very eyes. Everything went off without a hitch, and the system announced that the spirit world would open in 10 seconds. It wished Yuan Shitianzu good luck, leaving him hanging in suspense, waiting for the unknown. Our hero couldn't make sense of what was happening. Everything around him was completely alien and mysterious, sparking a wild mix of emotions inside him. A blend of fear, surprise, and intense curiosity. And that's when the countdown began, warning him that the spirit world was about to crack open, and every second that ticked by filled his heart with tension and raw anticipation. The download finished, and our player was instantly yeeted into the Yulin Night God tunnel. There he was hit by a wall of darkness and seriously mysterious sensations that wrapped around him from every direction, sparking a crazy mix of both anxiety and excitement. The main quest was to survive inside the tunnel for 3 hours straight, but this was no joke. It came with an S-class difficulty rating, promising some next-level trials and a very real chance of death. Another task was to explore the spirit world, but get this, it was strictly forbidden to bring any items from the ordinary world, which made his whole expedition even more dangerous and unpredictable. Yuanzi then looked down at his own hands, trying to process the whiplash of how fast everything happened as his mind raced to absorb every detail of this new environment. This was wild. The player realized he was in a completely different dimension, where the laws of reality were totally flipped from the world he knew, and everything around him felt alien and just plain wrong to him. A window popped up again explaining that the Yulin Tunnel was one of the 10 great stories from the Zhongjin War, which gave Yuanzi a whole new level of understanding about this world's past and meaning. Info dumps started appearing in front of the player again, giving him a heads up that his journey and initiation into the spirit realm was about to kick off for real. The story of the Yulin Tunnel dated back to the end of the last century. During a late-night dig in a torrential downpour, a whole crew of workers vanished inside it, and nobody has seen them since. The search party only found a single worker wandering the mountains. He was alive, but his mind was completely shattered. All he did was repeat one single sentence over and over during questioning. Day after day, the man kept frantically warning everyone around him not to enter the temple under any circumstances, just repeating it on a loop. Yuanzi listened to this information dump intently, his face a complete poker mask as he slowly analyzed what he'd heard, comparing the facts, the details, and all the possible consequences to figure out his next move. Then, as he started scoping out the spot where he'd spawned, he focused hard, trying to understand what was right in front of him, observing every single detail. And it turned out right in front of him was the exact same tunnel from the urban legends, the one locals had been whispering about for years. They treated it like it was cursed ground, a forbidden and dangerous place. Our hero tried to calm his nerves, telling himself it couldn't possibly be the same Yulin Tunnel from Shanghai's top 10 urban legends, the one surrounded by all those creepy-as-hell rumors. The young man remembered that he had actually passed this place just a few days before, back when he was returning to his hometown to honor his father's memory, and it looked completely different then. In reality, the place wasn't nearly as old and run down as it seemed to him at that moment, as if time had deliberately twisted its appearance and atmosphere. The boy tried to piece together this insane puzzle and figured that he'd been deliberately dragged into a real-life urban legend in order to complete a task given to him by some mysterious force. And that mysterious voice had already assigned him 2 different missions. Okay, if the very first quest is just to survive, that means something seriously dangerous is hiding out in this area. And the mission to explore the spirit world, that could only be pointing to this mysterious tunnel. Once that clicked, our player realized the spot he was in was a total death trap for real. There was no easy way to get out of this mess. Still, if he was given a quest, there had to be a reward for clearing it. And if this pop-up was legit, then his class was Night Wanderer and he was starting at level 0. He was gonna have to grind for it. That's when Yuanzi knew Brother Bin wasn't capping. This map really could change his entire life. But at the same time, he got that finishing this quest was gonna be insanely difficult and dangerous. The spirit world's lethal mode was giving 0 chill vibes. Every little thing about this place hinted at legit dangers, traps, and trials that could totally wipe out any careless player. Suddenly, the lights that were lighting up the tunnel's path just instantly blinked out. Yuanzi was plunged into complete and total darkness, where every single noise and shadow felt like a threat you couldn't even see. Spinning around, our guy spotted the silhouette of a person, which immediately set him on edge. He definitely wasn't expecting anyone else to be down here, and his heart started pounding like a drum from the shock. But as the figure shambled closer, our hero's face twisted with surprise and straight-up horror. He couldn't process who was standing in front of him or what their intentions were. The stranger was dressed in tattered rags, and its limbs were so skinny they looked almost skeletal. The whole look was terrifying, unsettling, and low-key felt unreal. It became obvious right away that this was that same group of workers mentioned in the system window, and their horrifying appearance confirmed all the scary rumors and legends about them were no cap. Their faces were pure nightmare fuel. They were creepy, disturbing, and looked completely lifeless, like shadows, and darkness itself had sculpted their features, sparking a terrifying horror deep in his soul. The group moved like a horde of zombies, slow and steady, with their glowing red eyes creating a feeling of absolute doom. That's when Yuanzi realized he was facing a bunch of decaying corpses. The nasty smell of death just wrapped itself around everything, cranking up his feelings of horror and hopelessness. Without hesitating for a second, He instantly bolted. His heart was racing like crazy, and pure fear pushed his legs to run faster than his brain could even process the danger. The strangers, who were literally the walking dead, reached their hands out for him like they wanted to grab him, which freaked him out even more and made him run faster. The feeling of danger was so real you could practically touch it. They moved automatically without any thought or feeling, just pushing straight forward, almost like they were programmed to chase him, which somehow made them even more terrifying and unpredictable. Our hero then realized that these creatures didn't actually seem interested in chasing him, which calmed him down a bit, even if his heart was still trying to beatbox its way out of his chest. And the fear just wasn't going to vanish into thin air. Yuanzi decided he needed to get his bearings and fast, so he started carefully scanning his surroundings to figure out what was what. He had to size up the threats and pinpoint the safest route to, not die. That's when his stomach dropped. He realized there were even more of those creatures on the other side, a number so huge it felt like they went on forever. The feeling of being totally screwed just hit him like a ton of bricks. It became crystal clear that these things had singled him out, forming a perfect circle around the guy who just dropped into this world. All their creepy, menacing energy was laser-focused entirely on him. The creatures didn't make a sound. All they could do was move their hands in slow-mo and shuffle forward like puppets controlled by some unseen master. This whole silent treatment just cranked the creep factor up to 11, making them seem absolutely relentless. Our boy thought he was toast, completely cornered with no way out of this mess. The sheer number of them boxing him in made him feel utterly trapped, with zero chance of making a break for it. But here's the thing, he was dead wrong, because these workers weren't about to attack him, not even close. With their slow, deliberate gestures, they were actually showing him where he needed to go. It was like they were his personal creepy-as-hell guides leading him through danger. And off to the side, he could just make out a small house. It stood out against the pitch-black night, its shape barely visible in the shadows, giving off some seriously mysterious and suspenseful vibes. He booked it, sprinting in that direction, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. His legs were burning, struggling to keep up with his racing thoughts. A few yards later, he burst out of the tunnel into a pretty massive open area. The whole place was dimly lit by a weak sunlight. The air felt fresh, and the space just opened up in every direction. But all around him, there was nothing but mountains. The darkness and the crushing loneliness pressed in on him, bringing a heavy wave of hopelessness. His heart started hammering even harder with pure anxiety and fear. But weirdly enough, the creatures that hadn't attacked him had stayed behind, which was super strange. The system prompt was clear: this was a mortal task, and one tiny mistake could mean game over. The young man still couldn't wrap his head around why those workers had backed off so easily. They even showed him the way, which left him with this bizarre mix of confusion and a deeply suspicious sense of safety. Our hero's mind was racing with questions about what just happened, but he knew the smartest move was to put some serious distance between himself and those things, no matter their reasons. Wary of any unexpected danger, he kept following the path through the dense forest. The only light he had was the moon, peeking through the thick treetops and casting long, spooky shadows all over the ground around him. The silence was just wrong. Our boy realized that at 7 at night, a forest like this should be buzzing with the sound of insects and mountain critters. And the fact that there was nothing, absolute dead silence, was making his skin crawl. But there was nothing else around, just the dark outline of the house up ahead. It was his only landmark in the endless silent darkness of the forest, so he pushed forward. The player got closer, stepping onto the property with extreme caution. He could feel the tension building with every single step he took. The shadow of the house loomed over him, feeling more threatening and alien by the second. He moved at a snail's pace, wanting to properly scout out this unknown location first. He's carefully scoping out every single corner, making sure to move only when necessary so he doesn't just walk into some unforeseen danger. Cobwebs are hanging literally everywhere, a dead giveaway that nobody's stepped foot in here for a long, long time. And every single silky strand just screamed that this place had been completely forgotten and left to rot. There's some junk scattered on the ground, but everything's so ancient and busted up, it's impossible to tell what any of it is. He's on high alert with every single step he takes. After checking everything out, it hits him. This isn't some random house. Bruh, this is an actual temple. It's both majestic and seriously mysterious, just radiating this ancient power and an enigmatic vibe that makes his heart start pounding. He can't even wrap his head around the conclusion he just came to, because everything around him feels so real, yet at the same time it's completely unbelievable. It sends a jolt of both fear and awe through him, and right then a screen pops up in front of his face with a warning. It tells him he needs to prepare for the meeting. No other details, just that. It just leaves him hanging in total suspense. Then it clicks for Yuanzi. He remembers that voice warning him not to set foot in the temple. But where's he supposed to go? He's already left the tunnel behind. And the only thing in front of him is this majestic, mysterious temple, basically daring him to come forward. That's when our guy starts thinking those creepy monsters might have intentionally herded him right to this spot. It's a setup designed to make him feel terrified and totally powerless against whatever's coming. He's been handed 2 separate quests, but when you put them together, it means the player's on a 3-hour timer. 3 hours to get through the entire temple, and you know not die. All while navigating deadly traps and whatever random threats pop up around every corner. Our MC realizes that if he pushes forward, there's a very good chance he's going to get himself killed. But on the flip side, turning back isn't a safe bet either. This whole situation has him stuck between a rock and a hard place, forced to choose between a known risk and complete uncertainty. He remembers that right at the start of the game, the system specifically told him to stay out of the temple. That warning made him pause, caught between following the rules and the feeling that events were just going to happen, pushing him forward no matter what. But as he starts walking up the steps, our hero realizes his real mission is to explore this temple and uncover its secrets, no matter how terrified he is, and no matter what dangers are lurking around every corner. So screw it, he decides to press on anyway. He has to find out the truth about this place and crack open its secrets. He needs to understand what's really waiting for him inside, even if it costs him his life. As he's heading up the stairs, something catches his eye. A light is glowing from inside the building, which totally throws him for a loop. I mean, the temple looks like it's been abandoned for centuries. But just then he hears footsteps behind him, and his heart just about hammers out of his chest. A wave of pure tension and fear washes over every inch of his body, making him whip his head around nervously. He spins around, but there's nothing there, just the tall grass swaying in the breeze, which only cranked up his anxiety, making him feel completely trapped in this mysterious environment. Yuanzi was on high alert because his hearing was sharp as a tack right then, and every single sound he picked up felt like it was critically important. He was forced to listen intently to every movement around him, but no matter how hard he looked, he found nothing. The fact that he couldn't find the source of the noises left him with this creepy feeling of empty space and hidden danger, but he knew what came next after such weird sounds. A ghost was definitely about to show up. The thought made his heart pound in his chest, filling his mind with anxious dread. He was facing an unavoidable encounter with something supernatural. He could hear footsteps getting closer and closer. The young man got the distinct impression that whatever it was, it wanted to lure him inside. This only strengthened his gut feeling that every single step was part of a trap. Without wasting a second, he booked it running as fast as he could, thinking that Brother Bin had turned into a ghost and was now taking out all his anger on him. And this feeling of being chased sent his heart into overdrive, and his legs pumping on pure instinct. He could hear the footsteps getting nearer and nearer, but there was no one there, which made it feel like some supernatural presence was hunting him down with an invisible force. The boy just screamed out in fear and confusion. His voice echoed through the dark forest, a perfect soundtrack to his panic and helplessness against this unseen threat. He ran as fast as his legs would carry him, his heart about to burst from his chest, his legs struggling to keep up with the panic that had completely taken him over. Pushing open the temple door, our player found himself inside. The cold darkness of the room immediately enveloped him, hitting him with both fear and a deep dread of the unknown. Trying to get his bearings, he took a deep breath to calm his nerves, attempting to push down his fear and gather his strength, so he could make his next move in the dark temple. Looking around, Yuanzi realized the door was still wide open, which made him instantly worried and suspicious. I mean, who in their right mind would leave a door open in a temple like this? He sat on the threshold of the building and scanned his surroundings, listening for the slightest sound. He was trying to figure out if he was really being followed, or if his imagination was just messing with him. Suddenly, it was clear the footsteps were gone. It brought a moment of relief, but that deep-seated anxiety wasn't going anywhere. It forced him to stay on edge, listening for any noise. For a second, the young man actually felt safe, even though the dead silence surrounding him was deeply suspicious and unnervingly calm. This quiet felt like a trap. He noticed candles were placed around the room, casting a soft light and throwing long shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere of mystery and ancient secrets. As the temple was flooded with a crimson glow, the boy turned, sensing a strange presence. And right behind him stood the giant shadow of a silent, threatening creature. It towered over him, making his heart pound with fear. On either side of it stood 2 beautiful ladies, carved out of stone. Their majestic posture and incredibly detailed craftsmanship inspired both awe and a feeling of some mystical presence. Our player got the feeling they were looking right at him, as if they were watching his every move and judging his every step in this mysterious temple. Then in the center of the temple stood the statue of a woman who looked so alive it was scary, her eyes filled with intelligence and emotion. Her presence gave off an incredible mysterious aura. The whole setup was both unnerving and mesmerizing at the same time. It was a flawless piece of art, blending fear and awe in a way that just made you want to stare at every little detail. From where Yuanzi stood, the statue looked absolutely massive. It just loomed over him, giving off this insane vibe of unstoppable power and ancient mystery. The young man just chilled, calmly scanning his surroundings and taking in every single detail. He even picked up on the subtle ways the light and shadows danced, creating a seriously unique atmosphere. He saw that the statue was definitely supposed to be holding something, but the smaller details had been totally erased. Time had worn them away, and it was impossible to tell what exactly it was clutching in its palm. He didn't stop there and kept hunting for clues, carefully checking every single stone. He scanned every crack and every carving around him. He was really hoping to crack the code of this mysterious place. Our hero then spotted a stone in front of him with some writing on it. He leaned in to inspect the symbols carefully. He quickly realized this could be some major intel on the temple, its backstory, and its whole purpose. The inscriptions were from the beginning of the Ming dynasty, which means they were over 500 years old. This find was a huge deal, historically, basically a direct peek into what went down in ancient times. After reading all that, Yuanzi got even more on edge. He felt a shiver run down his spine, getting the feeling that something dangerous and unknown was about to go down right in front of him. What he couldn't wrap his head around was who kept changing the candles in the main hall. It's not like any of the people he'd met had shown up again. Yet the mysterious light kept its constant brightness and warmth. A new theory sparked in his mind. Right then, he felt his brain shift into high gear, trying to connect the dots between all the events. He was trying to figure out the true nature of what was happening all around him. The young man started replaying everything that had happened so far. He racked his brain trying to remember everyone he'd seen, thinking over every little detail of his encounters and conversations. He was trying to piece together the full picture of what went down before. And one thing was crystal clear. The candles were fresh and they were burning bright, throwing a warm, flickering light across the walls. The whole scene was creating this weird atmosphere of mystery and suspense. He thought it might be a member of the work crew. It seemed plausible that they too had stumbled into this temple, and from there everything just slowly spiraled out of control. Now the whole thing has probably become some urban legend that the locals whisper about. Either way, the young man knew he was in some serious trouble. And if he wanted to get out of this alive, he had to hunt down every single clue, every trail, or any detail that could pull him out of this mess. He was dead set on not dying here, and his determination grew with every single step, because he knew deep down he would make it to the end. He was going to uncover every last secret this temple was hiding. Sitting on the floor, Yuanzi started to inspect the skeleton. It had probably been there for a long, long time, and he paid close attention to every bone and scrap of cloth. He was trying to figure out its story and the circumstances of its death. Its chest and a few ribs were busted, and there was a pretty noticeable crack in its right shoulder. But it wasn't that big, which suggested the wounds were old and probably not what actually killed the person. The young man also had a hunch that something was hidden in the uniform's pocket, so he began to carefully check out the fabric. He was hoping to find some kind of object or note that could give him some valuable information. This was a story that had already ended, leaving behind only the faint footprints of time and memory. And now every little detail had the potential to tell the tale of past events and the people who got caught up in this ancient adventure. Another brother had vanished around that time, and he was the third disciple of the temple when a powerful demon showed up on Sandao Mountain. This thing was hitting up the temple every single night, hunting people, and just terrorizing them by being there. So the master ordered the disciple to keep everything. On the down low from the pilgrims, scared that it would tank the temple's attendance numbers, and they honestly believed that a few of these talismans were enough to exorcise the ghosts. But he had a really bad feeling about all this because lately, his brothers were disappearing more and more, and he knew he had to track down the senior disciple to talk about what was happening. They needed a game plan to protect the rest of the disciples and the temple itself. Turns out the senior disciple had also ghosted them. The other disciples ran to the master screaming that this couldn't go on. They were totally consumed by fear and despair, feeling completely useless against a threat they couldn't even begin to understand. The man ordered him to his room after sunset, claiming he was about to reveal a secret concerning 1,000 years of the temple's rise and fall. According to Yuanzi, this would unveil ancient mysteries that controlled the destiny of both the temple and its disciples. But the story was cut short and left unfinished, leaving behind a huge cloud of uncertainty and mystery. It demanded that every hidden secret be dragged into the light. The worker who died had tucked the temple servant's notes into his pocket, and that was a massive clue, because the real reason for the downfall of the Sandow Mountain Temple was still a secret, and finding it out was absolutely critical. The young man knew he had to press on, fully aware that the danger was likely to ramp up with every step he took, which just made him even more on edge in this creepy place. But according to an urban legend, one of the workers actually managed to get out alive. And if our guy could just follow in his footsteps, he might be able to find a way out and dodge the dangers lurking all over this place. It was so dead quiet all around him that our hero felt a major chill run down his spine. In that deafening, mysterious silence, the sound of his own breathing felt incredibly loud and scary. He realized that something was definitely waiting for him outside. So, heading out that way was a no-go. He had to find another path inside, moving with extreme caution, through the darkness, listening for even the slightest sound. But he couldn't just stay put either, because he had to keep searching for something new. Any single step could potentially uncover new clues or hint at a hidden threat. If he didn't move, his chances of survival would plummet. So, at that moment, Yuanzi decided to push forward to make some progress in this story, hoping to find new leads and finally understand the temple's secrets that had been buried for centuries. Eventually, he got to another area, carefully scanning everything from the obvious details down to the smallest cracks and tracks on the ground. He was trying to figure out what happened here and what secrets the place was hiding. It was pitch black, and only the light from the temple offered any clue to where the paths were, lighting up narrow alleys and the shadows of trees and rocks hiding in the dead of night. A new spot opened up in front of the young man, also looking half ruined on the outside, and a total mystery on the inside, with cracked walls and a partially collapsed roof. While inside, there was just a mysterious darkness and the smell of ancient history. Inside, there was a courtyard, and it was surrounded by buildings that were partially destroyed and completely covered in moss, with windows and doors that were just dark holes. The whole place just gave off a vibe of being abandoned and full of mystery. The player's brow furrowed, his eyes darting around, straining to catch any sound or spot the slightest hint of movement. He was scanning for any danger lurking in the shadows of the dark, decaying buildings. Without wasting a second, he pressed forward meticulously, checking every nook and cranny so he wouldn't miss a single clue. He had to stay ready for whatever fresh hell was about to pop off. Yuanzi noticed that the entire path from where he started to his current spot was a complete mess. The whole place was littered with traces left by a construction team. Tools were scattered everywhere, along with pieces of wood and bone. Honestly, the whole vibe was impossible to get used to. Every single step was a grim reminder of the danger he was in, keeping him on edge and forcing Yuanzi to be ridiculously cautious. It looked like almost everyone had suffered messed up injuries to their forearms before they died. But, and this was the super sketchy part, their shoulder bones didn't have a single crack on them, which was both bizarre and alarming. Suddenly, a voice cried out for help, echoing from somewhere ahead in the darkness, trembling with absolute terror. The desperate sound made his heart pound in his chest. He had no clue who was screaming or what their real goal was. The calls for help got louder and louder, bouncing off the walls and down the corridors. With every passing second, the sound amplified. It created this chilling feeling that whoever was yelling for help was getting dangerously close. Our hero knew that any sane person would have been long gone, but he felt like he couldn't just dip. He had to get to the bottom of this, no matter how risky it was. In that moment, the only thing the young man could think about was his brother Ben. His face, his words, and his advice kept flashing through his mind. It pushed him to stop hesitating and just act. That memory forced him to shove his fear to the side. He made a mental threat to send all the dirt he had in those hidden files straight to his uncle. Leo would finally see with his own two eyes what a snake his son truly was and what he'd been up to this whole time. Outside, the night was pitch black and deep. The only light was the cold glint of distant stars cautiously piercing through the gloom. It cast a faint but necessary glow on his surroundings as he looked around. He could see that thick spiderwebs were hanging from literally everything, blanketing the walls, corners, and random objects, creating a seriously depressing vibe of neglect and decay. The hero suddenly spotted a skeleton that seemed way more intact than the others. It was like time had barely touched it, and this freaky level of preservation immediately set off alarm bells in his head. Only its shoulder blades were broken exactly like the skeleton back in the main hall. For a split second, our hero thought it might just be a wild coincidence, but that doubt didn't last long. He also noticed something else. There was some unknown object tucked away in its pocket. Hidden from view, the detail instantly sparked his curiosity and cranked up his sense of danger. The young man carefully pulled out the object and was shocked to see it was an old mirror, a strange-looking talisman, and a tattered book filled with mysterious symbols. All these items looked incredibly worn down. They had obvious signs of aging all over them. It was immediately clear that they were ancient artifacts. They had been forgotten for ages and had clearly passed through more than one generation. A system window instantly popped up in front of his eyes, telling the player that a rare item from the spirit world had been discovered and added to his inventory. It was a one-time use item, and if it was carefully placed on the forehead of a yin creature, it would banish that thing from this world for good. Yuanzi knew right away that this talisman was beyond valuable. It could be a total game-changer in his fight against whatever was lurking here. But then his attention was snagged by another item, one that looked just as mysterious and promised to spill even more tea about the world around him. This book held an ancient story that you could only understand by diving deep into every single page and uncovering all the hidden details of the narrative. The author wrote that 2 years had passed since he'd arrived at Mount Sandao, a time where he'd been through a lot and gained some serious experience while living among the hermits. Apparently, his older brother had told him to officially accept the master's teachings right after he arrived and purified the souls, because the ritual of cleansing souls with moonlight was a mandatory part of the process. Then things got real dark when some dude named Prince Yan showed up, and smoke completely choked the sky. The master had to purify souls again, doing everything he could to stop the yin curse from wrecking all the people. The young man put 2 and 2 together and realized, bruh, this is a diary. He even noticed the paper felt exactly like the stuff he'd found back in the main hall, but he was low-key skeptical that the details about these priests of the night were historically accurate. The journal also said a door had suddenly flown open right in front of the master, and his older brother, who had been missing all night, reappeared looking like a straight-up zombie, his chest a bloody mess, with his heart literally ripped out. The rest of the pages were torn, so the rest of the story was a complete mystery, leaving our guy with a major cliffhanger and a serious case of the creeps. That's when the hero realized he couldn't stay here any longer, because a swarm of ants was crawling up his back, sending him into a full-blown panic. It was a grim reminder of some invisible danger lurking nearby. But then he remembered he was still holding on to something, a mirror that could be hiding secrets, or might even be the key to solving this whole mess. He decided to give it a closer look. The mirror was completely intact and in good shape, which gave him a sliver of hope that it might reveal something important or hidden. The young man's eyes went wide with pure shock and fear when he saw something in the mirror's reflection. It was something he could have never imagined, and it made his heart hammer against his ribs. Reflected behind him was a faceless creature, but you could clearly see its eyes. A wave of pure horror crashed over the young man, a cold dread that literally froze the blood in his veins. The young man let out a blood-curdling scream. He was so overwhelmed by fear that the sound ricocheted off the empty walls. He immediately started chanting prayers, desperately trying to yeet the evil force that was bearing down on him, filling the room with a tense magical energy. Then he started praying to Brother Bindi, begging for mercy, because up to that point he honestly thought he was the one who caused all this horror. Looking back into the mirror, Yuanzi prayed with everything he had, hoping his exorcism talisman would work on the ghost, praying its magic would be enough to cleanse the room of this dangerous entity. But it was a total bust. The creature didn't even flinch. It didn't disappear, and its unnerving presence just kept pressing down on Yuanzi, cranking his fear and despair up to 11. Sitting on the floor, our hero just started sobbing his eyes out. He was hit with this crushing guilt for ever leaving the temple, because after that everything had gone sideways and the situation had spiraled out of control. It felt like the dead workers were trying to drag him down into their grim, dark world. The atmosphere was pure next-level horror, and every single step felt like it could be a death trap. The player kept hearing footsteps behind him and was dead sure it was the same creature, the one that had been chasing him earlier. His heart started pounding out of his chest, and he was completely overwhelmed by fear. Yuanzi braced himself, ready to fight whatever ghosts were coming for him. He was determined to protect himself at all costs and wasn't about to let them take his life. After a moment's thought, the kid looked out the window and noticed a strange red glow in the courtyard. It was blinking, grabbing his attention, and basically screaming that a new danger or mystery was lurking in the dead of night. This red glow was impossible to miss. It was like an artist had put a spotlight on it, really hammering home its mysterious and unsettling presence. Looking closer, he saw that it was a pair of red shoes, just ditched by whoever owned them, that were glowing strangely in the dark, creating a mystical, mysterious vibe as it covered its mouth with its hands. The player had to physically stop himself from screaming in absolute terror. He could feel his heart hammering away and a chilling dread washed over every inch of his body. He honestly thought he was losing his mind, because they were in an ancient Ming Dynasty temple, and a pair of red shoes just seemed so bizarre and out of place, which only cranked up the horror factor. The young man kept staring out the window, carefully watching the strange object, trying to wrap his head around its nature and figure out if it posed some kind of threat. All sorts of thoughts were racing through his head as he tried to make sense of everything he'd witnessed so far, trying to understand what all these weird and disturbing events meant for his survival. You could see the sheer despair on the young man's face at that moment, with the darkness, the shadows, and all the strange phenomena around him, only amplifying his feelings of fear and hopelessness. Looking down at the items in his hands, he wondered what the hell he was supposed to do in this situation and how he could save himself feeling completely powerless against a supernatural threat. UNC's shoulders were absolutely killing him, and it felt like they were about to just burst. It was like an unbearable tension had built up inside him that was almost impossible to take. The boy took off running at an incredible speed, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest, desperate to escape the danger that had ambushed him so suddenly and terrifyingly. The ghost on his shoulder was getting heavier with every passing minute, crushing his body, with invisible chains of fear that forced him to take every single step with a ridiculous amount of effort. Never in his life had the player had such a hard time moving, because every step felt like a struggle against some invisible force that was pulling him down. It forced him to use an insane amount of energy just to move forward a tiny bit. Completely exhausted, he collapsed onto the floor, nervously trying to get his breathing under control and recover some strength after that draining escape. He could feel his heart slowly starting to return to a normal rhythm. It turned out that the main hall was the safest place where he could rest and recover, enjoying at least one moment of peace in the middle of all the chaos and danger that surrounded him. After sitting for a moment, Yuanzi noticed that the pain in his shoulder was finally starting to fade. This gave him a sense of relief and allowed him to gather his strength to think about his next move and assess the situation around him. At first, our boy actually manages to juke these weird-ass boots. Then, with a ghost hitching a ride on his shoulder, he can barely even stumble his way into the main hall. Every single step is a massive burden, with the tag team of pure terror and exhaustion just crushing his body. But he knows for a fact that if they decide to jump him at the same time, he's totally screwed. His enemy's power and speed were just on a whole other level, completely outclassing him. It left him with nothing but despair and the cold, hard fact that a throwdown was about to happen. He knew he had to get his mind right before heading back out, because there could be creatures out there, even more messed up than what he'd already run into. But before our boy could even hype himself up, a system window just pops up right in his face. It lets him know he's actually cleared the main quest, and for just a hot second, he feels this massive wave of relief and is low-key proud of himself. This news totally blindsides him though, because time had flown by, so fast he hadn't even clocked how many hours had gone by. He was just so deep in the zone dealing with the constant stress danger and the non-stop fight to just stay alive. He also snagged a talisman, got some EXP, and get this, a full 36 hours of downtime before the next spirit world unlocked, where a whole new set of trials would be waiting for him. In a flash, Yuanzi's body feels weightless and starts glowing with this insane blue light, wrapping his whole aura in magical energy. It floods every cell in his body, with pure power making him feel crazy light and strong. Then it clicks. He just got zapped right back into his old room. The familiar walls and all his stuff gave him this super weird feeling of deja vu. Our boy is shook because he definitely didn't see that plot twist coming. His brain is working overtime trying to process what just happened, fighting through the shock and the unexpected hype. Feeling totally drained, he just collapses onto his bed and realizes the air in his house seems way cleaner now. After all the hell he'd just been through, it filled his lungs with this sense of calm and just lightness. But then he bolts upright, remembering he's got to track down his talisman today. The thought of that mission fills him with a fresh shot of determination, making him totally forget how wiped out he is and laser focus on the urgent goal ahead. The second he even thinks about the item, a brightly glowing inventory window pops up right in front of him, showing off all his loot. This gives him an awesome sense of control, letting him quickly pick out whatever he needs. The inventory system is so intuitive it basically works on autopilot. Bruh doesn't even need to learn how to use it, because any item he wants just materializes in his hands in a split second, responding to his thoughts and intentions, with no extra effort needed whatsoever. His level is still stuck at 0 though, so our guy doesn't have access to any class-specific abilities yet, and has to rely solely on his base skills and his own wits to deal with all the danger. As he grabs his phone, our MC figures he should probably hit up his cousin. He's got this urgent need to spill the tea on everything that's been going on and get some advice. It immediately clicks that the dude from the detective agency told him to get in touch if he found any new leads. That's when it dawns on our boy just how serious this situation really is. But no cap, if he tells them everything that went down, they're 100% going to think he's completely lost his mind, and just drags him away, not even trying to get the details and not believing a single word he's saying. On the flip side, his own brother had vanished under some seriously sketchy circumstances, and the investigator even warned that UNZ could be the next one to just disappear. All this basically confirmed that their whole crew was dealing with this exact kind of messed up problem. When he calls up Lee Dongzae, our boy is shook to find out the dude is actually happy for him. You know, for escaping the spirit world. And this unexpected joy totally caught him off guard, because instead of being hyped or anxious like you'd expect, Lee just sounded genuinely relieved. He even started off by gassing Yuanzi up for officially becoming a spirit world traveler, saying how much he admired the achievement and stressing that this success opened up a ton of new opportunities. The key difference between them was that Lee was officially registered with this status, which is why he could offer Yuanzi a choice. He was basically giving him the chance to call the shots for himself, to decide if he wanted to accept all the powers and perks that came with it. Lai explained there are pretty much 2 ways to play this. The first path is to go legit get an official status and get access to all the resources. The second option is to stay a lone wolf practitioner, as long as you don't use your skills for anything illegal. Without wasting a second, Yuanzi immediately decided he was all in. He wanted to join the organization and was ready to put in the work. He felt like it was his responsibility to use his skills and what he wanted for the good of society. They decided to link up the next day at 8 in the morning to hash out a game plan and prep for the next moves. This stuff required precision and serious teamwork from both of them. Our hero finally apologizes for hiding that map, the one that was at the bottom of the box during the investigation. He finally realized how big of a screw-up that was, and he was trying to patch things up, confidence, and to show he had his act together. The dead of night fell over the city like a thick blanket, signaling to everyone it was time to crash, shrouding the streets in a deep and quiet calm. The only light came from the street lamps, which cast a soft glow on the empty sidewalks. The next morning, sunlight blasted right into our hero's room, flooding the space with a warm, brilliant light. It torched the last traces of darkness and hit different like a total reset button, offering a fresh start and new chances to make a move. He stumbled out into the hallway, realizing he was starving. His empty stomach felt like an anchor weighing down his every step and forcing him to hunt down some food to get his strength back. He needed to recharge before he could do anything else, but sleep was a no-go, because every time he shut his eyes, he got this creepy-ass feeling that a ghost was standing right behind him, just watching in silence. It was giving him major chills, and he couldn't relax for a single second. His grandma and aunt immediately noticed something was up. He looked totally wrecked with dark circles and a haunted expression that instantly set off their alarm bells. Right away, Jean started cracking jokes about what her nephew could have possibly been doing, all night laughing and teasing him to try and cut through the thick, tense vibe in the room. The boy quietly made his way over to his grandpa, feeling that warmth and dependability that only comes from family, the kind of thing that always made him feel safe and secure. He started asking him about the disappearance of that construction crew, since he'd stumbled upon an article about it online and wanted to get the full story. His grandpa explained that it happened a really long time ago, and honestly, he didn't remember a thing. He added that the events from that time had pretty much faded from his memory, leaving behind nothing but blurry impressions and old feelings that were impossible to piece back together. Hearing their chat, his grandma added that the one worker they managed to find also vanished not long after. This new piece of intel just piled on more anxiety, making them all wonder about the seriously sketchy stuff going down around them. After his wife called him out for having memory lapses, the old man argued that you've got to trust facts, not rumors, and that the older you get, the more you're tempted to believe in tall tales. Yuanzi understood that the employee had ended up in the temple after 36 hours and was completely unable to get out, trapped inside that magical space. The second stage was about to get a whole lot harder, and if the kid wanted to make it out alive, his best bet was to squeeze more information out of the organization to get ready for the danger ahead. He needed a crystal clear picture of the rules and all the possible threats. After packing his things and grabbing some breakfast, the young man told his family he was just heading out for a walk, trying not to stir up any unnecessary worry while hiding the real reason for his trip. His grandpa watched him leave, wondering what his grandson was planning to do, but he kept his mouth shut. He felt a weird mix of anxiety and curiosity as he tried to guess what the kid's next move would be. A car was already waiting for him outside the house, its engine humming quietly with the doors wide open, all set to whisk him away to his next destination, where brand new challenges and missions were waiting for him. Taking one last look over the fence, the young man made sure the coast was clear, sizing up the situation before making his move. Making sure the coast was clear and that no obstacles were about to mess with his plans and next moves. The man opened the door and waved him inside, giving off a super hospitable vibe and inviting him to come on in. It created a sense of security, setting the stage to continue their chat or whatever was about to go down. Yuanzi glanced back and then strolled confidently toward the car, feeling decisive and totally in control of the situation. He was ready to keep moving and face whatever new challenges were waiting for him. When they finally met, the man offered him something to drink, and the kid chose a Coke because he was thirsty and wanted to quench it fast, feeling a slight rush of refreshment and energy. The investigator replied that he should have just bought a drink like that at a store on the way over, but our boy knew he didn't want to spend his own money, so he decided to just accept the offer without starting any pointless arguments. As they were driving to the place where his documents would be processed, the man decided to give him a crash course. He laid out the basic rules, responsibilities, and principles to get started. He introduced himself as Li Dongzi, a third-level explorer, making sure to highlight his experience and knowledge that could be super useful for teaching and mentoring the young man. The spirit world is a supernatural space that no scientist has ever been able to explain. Despite all the research and attempts to study it, the organization still hasn't cracked how it operates. This world existed both within their reality and beyond its limits, and only a select few could enter it. And to join the ranks of those people, you needed a card. The organization called it a character card, and those who got one had to get through a series of trials, which was pretty damn hard for them. If the character managed to complete the mission, they would receive the skills and attributes of their class. The way the spirit world picks its travelers hasn't been figured out yet, and how classes are assigned is a total mystery too. Sometimes the cards just materialize right inside a person's body, while others have stumbled across them on the street, and some people even got them by clicking a random link on the internet. But completing one mission is just the beginning. If a player wants to level up and get stronger, they have to take on new quests every time. The thing is, these tasks didn't pop up too often. The man suggested he look at his own case as a level 3 scout. Over the past 2 years, he had only entered the spirit realm once every 3 months, and on several occasions, he'd even had a brush with death. Continuing his story, he explained that the latest runs were done in teams, which was the whole essence of the spirit world. To the young man, this all sounded like a game, with a massive number of players. Solo missions were the most dangerous, with the absolute highest death rate, while things went way better in a squad. The world was divided into the mortal world and a penalty world, and in those last ones, if you failed, you'd just lose some points. The hero asked why the solo worlds were so dangerous, and Denzo explained that in team worlds, the young man had to work with leaders from all sorts of different classes. But in solo worlds, the challenges were specifically picked to match his class. Class masters had their own unique strengths, with the main ones being stuff like insight tracking and analysis. In the individual worlds our guy visited, he had to play the part of a detective. Denzo also added that he had to hide from his enemies and just survive out in the wild. He also mentioned that the dungeons for each class were totally different, depending on their various stages of development. Yuanzi put 2 and 2 together, realizing the theme of the spirit world was chosen based on his class. He could feel that his own inner abilities and talents were a perfect match for the rules and laws of this mysterious new world. The man explained that Lei Bing was most likely already dead, having failed during the trials. His words dropped like a lead balloon, filling the room with a heavy silence. Everyone present could feel the bitter sting of loss and the uncertainty of what was to come. Our young hero was completely in shock, so Denzo added that a ton of time had passed and that usually all the missions only last a few hours, or in a worst-case scenario, up to 2 days. But Lei Bing had been gone for 4 days straight. Yuanzi exclaimed, demanding to know more about the higher stages. His voice was packed with determination and impatience, because he wanted every single detail to understand what was waiting for him in the tougher levels of the trials. And it's true, the stages beyond the transcendental level can take way longer since each one gets progressively harder. They demand an insane amount of focus and endurance, and a deep understanding of the participants' inner strength. The young man hoped that his buddy had just moved on to another level, and all he could do was pray. That was actually the case. Until his friend came back, our MC decided to stick close to the organization. But before the man could introduce him to the others, he needed to know his morality score. This number basically decided how he'd be accepted into the circle of newbies, and whether he'd even be able to adapt to their rules. Staring at his own profile window, Yuanzi said his score was 60. His voice sounded confident, but it was low-key hiding. A bit of nervousness because of how important this info was. This was the biggest hurdle for any newcomer. If your morality dropped below a certain point, the system slapped you with a penalty mechanism, and every single traveler in his city would automatically get a quest to eliminate him. The hero was scared. This meant he'd be banned from doing anything remotely bad for the rest of his life, because that seriously limited his freedom of action. It forced him to carefully weigh every single move he made, just so he wouldn't break the super strict rules. He immediately asked the man if things like manual labor and reviewing educational materials were considered bad deeds. He was desperate to understand the boundaries of what was allowed, and to make sure his everyday actions wouldn't get him flagged. With the rules just laid out in his mind, the young man was convinced his life was totally over. His heart started hammering with fear, and his brain was playing a highlight reel of all the ways things could go wrong. But hearing this, the future Li Dongjie just cracked a smile and told him there was no reason to be stressing. He broke it down, saying that offenses like theft assault or straight-up robbery would get you a point deduction. We're talking a loss of up to 5 points for that kind of stuff. But actually taking someone out would cost you a solid 10 points. And if your actions result in a ton of victims, well, the math gets way more complicated depending on the case. But your personal drama and day-to-day issues, those don't affect your score one bit. You just have to be a decent human being. Stick to some basic moral principles. Help other people out, and don't go breaking any of the major rules. Because that's what ultimately decides your status and safety in this crazy world. But our boy thought that things like morality and law were just fake tools made up to keep everyone in line, and he low-key believed the world itself didn't need those kinds of restrictions. It's a safe bet that the spiritual world is still a huge unknown, and some ground rules are probably necessary to keep things under control, because who knows what kind of unseen forces could unpredictably mess with every single player in this game. They finally rolled up to the organization's headquarters and made their way inside. They moved cautiously through the corridors, checking out every single detail. Being in a place like this meant you had to stay on high alert and follow every safety rule to the letter. The man added that tanking your morality score was just as easy as raising it. All you had to do was not do anything stupid or reckless, because even small mistakes could send your score plummeting in a heartbeat. What's more, if a player was loaded, it was super easy to pump up that stat, which is exactly what gave them the ability to take another person's life with no comeback, all while hiding behind the morality system. Dongs then decided it was time to give him the rundown on the organization they were in. It was called the Five Elements Alliance. He explained that it was basically made up of 5 distinct factions. The investigator listed them off: the 100 Flowers Union, the White Tiger Corps, the Red Flame, the Water God Palace, and the Fortress. He broke down their roles and how much clout each one had within the alliance. All these groups represent 5 different classes. You've got the Wood Demon, the Scout, the Fire Master, the Water Ghost, and the Ghoul. Each one comes with its own unique abilities. They have their own specializations and jobs to do to keep the balance of power from tipping. Besides their little group, there are also other official organizations out there, and this one was only established in the last 20 years. Before it existed, it was a total free-for-all, with everyone just doing their own thing with zero coordination, which, as you can imagine, usually just ended in absolute chaos. The guy also mentioned that the Wood Demons have this crazy love for nature. He admitted he'd never met anyone so hardcore about protecting every single tree. He didn't even want to start talking about the other factions, though, because he figured their whole deal was just too basic and insane. Plus, he knew that spilling any details could just start a whole lot of drama, or pointless misunderstandings. The Scout class was the only one that was truly calm, cool, and collected. Its members knew how to read a situation without letting feelings get in the way, planning their moves in advance, and making smart calls. The traveler broke it down for the kid, explaining that the different class abilities were kinda like a game. He said, fire represented aggressive fighters, water was for mages with control and healing powers, and earth was for the reliable defenders, while scouts were the observers. If he were a flame master, the young man would have probably been toast by now. That's because the fire class was so destructive and risky that one wrong move could instantly blow up in your face. So he kept hyping up the scouts, talking about how skilled they were in a fight. But he also brought up the Night Wanderers, pointing out that their abilities were so OP that nobody was even allowed to question them. Hearing this, Wenzuo wanted to know all the details about this class. He was trying to figure out their skills, their strategies, and their weaknesses to get a full picture of their power. The traveler went on saying that even at the starting levels, they had insane combat power and deadly skills, and that this class could actually communicate with souls, purify corpses, and straight-up control ghosts. But here's the catch. A class like that was basically a myth. At that moment, their branch didn't have a single Night Wanderer, which meant all operations of that type had to be put on hold. Frowning, the man turned back to the boy, looking like he was about to ask him something important. His gaze turned sharp and serious as he remembered he'd completely forgotten to ask him what his class was. He really hoped it wasn't a fire master, because he knew that power wasn't nearly as rare as the others. Awkwardly scratching his face, Yuanzi looked at the investigator and hesitantly told him that his class was Night Wanderer. He felt a mix of pride and excitement, knowing just how rare and dangerous that status was. The investigator stared at our hero, silent and intense, not saying a word, as he analyzed his every move, his every look, and the tiniest change in his expression. In the tense silence of the room, it was like the man totally forgot how to speak, just standing there, completely lost for words. He was probably so shook that his brain just blue screened, short-circuiting his usual reactions. Then finally snapping out of it, the man suddenly grabbed the young guy by the shoulders and looked him dead in the eye. In a strained voice, he asked him again if he was for real, if he was actually the legendary Night Wanderer. When he heard a yes, the man pulled him into a massive, joyful hug of relief, just bursting with genuine excitement and gratitude for finally finding someone from such a rare and valuable class. A Night Wanderer was seen as such an insane asset that even the biggest guilds were willing to fight tooth and nail for one, risking their reputations and tearing each other apart. Once the Purple Flame Guild almost managed to get a Wanderer on their side, but then a girl from the 100 Flowers Union somehow managed to charm him over to her side. After that, they secretly turned him into an undercover agent for them. He then asked what the young man's spiritual identity was. The kid calmly replied that his name in this world was Yuan Shitian Jun, not even trying to hide it, just straight up watching his new guy's reaction. The older dude gave a satisfied nod, calmly saying that for real, this was a solid choice. You could see the quiet pride and approval just shining in his eyes. He then had to fill out all the necessary paperwork. The deal was a starting salary of $20,000 a month, plus some pretty sweet bonuses for pulling off different missions. On top of that, there were massive bonuses for any special achievements that the higher-ups noticed given out for next-level accomplishments. Or, for showing some insane dedication to the cause. Our hero didn't have a single question. By that point, he had already meticulously thought through every single angle, weighing all the details and potential fallout from his future moves. The regular employees are there to help them handle the day-to-day grind by taking care of routine tasks and other minor assignments, which was a massive help for the travelers and let them lock in on the really important stuff. They kept moving down the hallway, walking carefully, until they finally got to the man's office, ready to head inside and meet him. Once they were in, he politely told him to make himself comfortable and just chill for a bit while all the documents were being prepped for signing. The young man waited, cool as a cucumber, for his contract to be fully drafted and ready to be signed and sealed. Guanya peeked her head into the room, cautiously asking if they needed a hand with anything. She was carefully scoping out the scene, totally ready to jump in if things went sideways. Wanzi clocked her, immediately remembering she was the same woman who'd inspected his phone earlier. The flicker of surprise and recognition on his face totally gave him away. The man asked her to get the new guy up to speed on all the procedures and goings-on, since he needed to go discuss some important matters with the director and couldn't afford any distractions. But before he bounced, he gave Yuanzi a heads up that the girl had a thing for really cringy jokes and that he'd just have to get used to it, because her sense of humor didn't always, land. Before this, he'd also told her to be a bit more reserved and careful around her new junior colleague, so she wouldn't cook up some awkward situation and totally ruin the first impression. So the girl kindly offered to answer any questions the young man had, ready to break down all the details and help him get settled into his new environment faster. As she watched her boss walk away, Guanja couldn't help but wonder why he was so ridiculously happy. I mean, the dude's steps were so light and springy, it looked like he was about to start skipping from pure excitement. Figuring it wasn't really her business anyway, she told Yuanzi it was time to sign the contract and get his alias registered in the spirit world, just to make sure everything was official and on the books. The girl assumed he had already gotten the basic rundown, but she mentioned there were still a few details and tricky points they needed to clear up so that he could get the full picture of the situation. From this day on, our hero's old passport was basically useless, because the organization was issuing him a brand new one that would be ready in 3 days. The entire registration process was put on the fast track with top priority. The spirit world system was no joke. She subtly let him know that using his real name was a huge no-go. She was constantly drilling the rules and restrictions into his head because he needed to tread carefully in this world, and for a damn good reason. You see, the classes in the spiritual world were basically split into 2 major categories. First, you had your orthodox classes with abilities that were well known and totally legit. And then you had the obscure classes packing some seriously dangerous and sketchy powers. These obscure class travelers were usually straight-up tyrants or bloodthirsty psychos, and every single one of them saw it as their personal mission to hunt down anyone from the orthodox classes. So, yeah, dropping your real identity in a world like this wasn't just risky, it was a straight-up death wish. The kid quickly figured out that their names probably weren't real either, because in this world, every marker of who you are could be a temporary alias or heavily protected. It was all about staying safe and dodging any unpredictable threats that might pop up. But even with all that secrecy, they were still an official organization, and most of the time, the victims they targeted were complete scumbags, or just people who were breaking the rules. That's because the system was super strict about justice, and came down hard on any deviations. Guanya asked the newcomer if he had a girlfriend and got a hard no for an answer. This actually made her crack a little smile, though she also seemed low-key disappointed and surprised. In fact, she was so completely shook by his response that she slapped a hand over her mouth, trying to hide her surprise while holding out her phone. She introduced herself as his new sister and suggested he check out a dating site to help him find a suitable partner, all while watching his reaction like a hawk. However, Yuanzi was more of an old-school kind of guy, preferring to meet girls in person, instead of messing around with online platforms. He felt it was the only real way to truly get to know a person. He also added that he already likes a girl, making it clear that his feelings were sincere. No cap, his affection didn't need some algorithm or outside help to exist. The recruiter was absolutely floored by his words. She totally didn't expect such a blunt confession from him, and her eyes went wide, with a mix of surprise and unconcealed admiration. She was convinced the young man was capping about the girl, but he just calmly said that if he was lying, lightning could strike him down that very second, proving just how serious he was. The girl then switched gears and started explaining the structure of the traveler groups in the canyon, talking about the roles of different factions and how the hero would join the White Tiger team after the trials. She was basically hinting that the team's pecking order was a super big deal. The young man said he was counting entirely on his mentor, Guan Yu, trusting her experience and know-how to guide him safely through this brand new world of travelers. She actually loved working with energetic young people, saying their enthusiasm and initiative were inspiring and made their teamwork more dynamic and productive. Yun Shitianjin was 21 years old, and it was at this age that he filled out his contract, carefully plugging in all the necessary information and complying with all the official formalities. As the recruiter scanned the info about his class, she literally froze for a second, her eyebrows shooting up in total disbelief. She was thinking about how insanely rare and important a class like this even was. Then everyone else saw his class. The night traveler and the others were so shook, they just stood there completely stunned. For a solid few seconds, nobody moved. They couldn't hide their shock and awe for this dude who was clearly built different. Guanja had to ask the hero again if there was some kind of mistake on the paper, watching his reaction like a hawk trying to double-check if the info was legit. But he just raised a finger and calmly said he wrote everything down correctly, confirming he was dead serious and confident about the accuracy of his documents. The scout immediately understood why their leader was so hyped and happy, seeing the results of this major recruitment play out. It was a massive W that brought a huge morale boost to everyone, and she enthusiastically clapped him on the shoulder. She welcomed him to the squad, keeping a close eye on his every move. and warned him not to even think about running off with some girl from another faction. Her words were packed with confidence, and a whole lot of seriousness, sending a clear message to everyone around her. She was making a point, and she made damn sure everyone was paying attention. Yuanzi confirmed he'd never betray them, making the promise with so much conviction and sincerity that everyone in the room could feel the unshakable power behind his words. But when the girl glanced at his level, she was totally blindsided to see it was at 0. That did not line up with her expectations at all, and really threw her for a loop. Usually after you pass the trial, you automatically hit level 1. That was a strict rule all the mentors followed, to make sure all the participants developed their skills properly. But then, something else caught her eye, a ribbon showing that his trial took place in the Yulin Tunnel. This immediately got her curious, making her think about just how ridiculously hard and dangerous that task must have been. Guanya couldn't figure out why the hero ended up there, since that trial site was infamous for being a death trap, with insane conditions. She couldn't wrap her head around what would possess him to go through that specific tunnel. The young man had no idea why his sister was so freaked out. To him, the whole situation seemed pretty normal. He just couldn't process what thoughts and feelings were hitting her so unexpectedly. He also wanted to ask about the guide he was supposed to get for the test, because without one, he was feeling a bit lost and didn't want to mess up, because he didn't have any clear instructions. But after he said that, you could hear a pin drop in the room, followed by heavy sighs. The vibe was quiet and tense, reflecting how surprised and confused everyone was. Bruh, nobody expected him to say something like that. The hero himself protested, asking everyone not to be such downers. He wanted the atmosphere to stay lively, and didn't want anyone giving up over a simple misunderstanding or disappointment. Yuanzi just thought he had made the whole situation super awkward, and that his whole attitude was just a massive letdown. He was now just stewing in this mix of disappointment and total helplessness as he faced the fallout from his own stupid mistakes. His sister decided to call their boss, hoping that having him there might help fix the situation and get things back under control. She knew she couldn't deal with all this drama on her own, especially seeing how they were reacting. Our hero seriously thought he had been handed a death mission, but the gag was he'd only explored like 20% of the world, and later found out the main hall was a complete safe zone. Turns out there were guidebooks right there that spelled out exactly what to do. After clearing the spirit world trials, and following those rules was mandatory for all travelers. But when it came to the Yulin Tunnel, things were a whole lot more complicated and way more dangerous. So the employee suggested he check out the Shanghai test database, hoping that getting access to its detailed records would help our MC figure out all the tricky parts of the mission. It would list out every location and every task, plus the mission grades, letting him get a deep dive into every part of the trials, so he could prepare as much as humanly possible. But with the exception of the Ghost Bride mission, all the other worlds had a super high survival rate, with the highest rank being an A, which showed they were carefully planned, and that most of the tests were relatively safe for travelers. Our hero kept scrolling through the site, digging for any extra information and trying to find some details, clues, or any kind of cheat code that could help him pass the trials safely and successfully. Finally, he stumbled on a test file that broke down that specific area and its history in insane detail, pointing out all the features, dangers, and secrets of the place, so he could go in with maximum caution. The notes made it crystal clear that the task was extremely dangerous, and that as of right now, not a single person had ever successfully made it through the Yulin Tunnel. It really hammered home how ridiculously hard the challenge was, and Yanzi was shook by the fact that nobody had ever survived. It sent a major jolt through him, a chaotic mix of fear and anxiety about the insane difficulties he was about to face. Meanwhile, the director was in his office holding a glass of wine, checking out some documents and planning his next move. He was just sipping it slowly, completely lost in thought. His movements were smooth and chill, like he had absolute confidence and control over every little thing, creating this unshakable atmosphere of calm and power around him. As a young commander, he wanted to gather a squad of loyal followers and build his reputation, and the Night Traveler was basically a godsend for him. Just then, a man walked up to his superior and told him he had found the young man he was looking for, promising that the organization would reward him properly for his efforts and his role in this important mission. Suddenly, Guancha kicked the boss's office door clean open, warning him that some serious problems had just popped up. You could see the raw determination and tension in his every single move. just to show how dire the situation really was. Without even listening, she immediately announced that the newbie had been assigned a mission in the Yulin Tunnel, making it crystal clear this mission was both urgent and insanely dangerous. A mission that demanded an immediate response from everyone in the room. Hearing this news, Dongsu literally chokes on his drink, and a look of pure shock and worry just flashed across his face. Because he never expected the new guy to be thrown into such a high-stakes mission right off the bat. The man's head started pounding, and he pressed his fingers to his temples, trying to push through the pain and focus on the million thoughts racing through his mind. Then, without wasting a single second, he decided to talk to Yuanzi, hoping to get the full lowdown on the circumstances and figure out some way to deal with this ridiculously dangerous situation. But when he walked into the office, he saw a young man just sitting in front of the computer, and he immediately picked up on a deathly vibe that was just choking the air, filling the room with a sense of danger and tension. The young guy was absolutely bugging out because he thought this test was basically a death sentence, and he was caught in a doom spiral, his mind just cranking out intense fear and the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Pulling himself together, the man explained that for every single rookie, the very first test is always a solo mission. He emphasized that this is just standard procedure, a way to gauge the skills and endurance of every new member. Just like Yuanzi, everyone else had to go through the ringer too. They all had to overcome the dangers and complexities of the tests, which pushed their skills and resilience to the absolute limit, not to mention their ability to make snap decisions. Under extreme pressure, the whole point was to test the hero's endurance. Only after he proved he was built different and could take the heat would he get his hands on some insane skills. Skills that would seriously boost his survival chances in the trials to come. The manager decided to send a request to his higher-ups to search for any intel in the databases of the major branches. He pointed out that this was the only real way he could help him get ready for this dangerous trial. In the end, the organization sent the young man home for the day and promised to hit him up later, giving him some time to process everything and mentally prep for the challenges ahead. He was in a seriously bad mood and asked his sister if he was really about to become one of those ghosts that supposedly haunt the church, feeling super anxious and uncertain because of all the scary stories he'd heard about the place. She promised she'd be his ride or die, basically vowing to support him, even in the most life-threatening circumstances. So, on one hand, the girl was totally supporting him, giving him a confidence boost and being his rock. But on the other hand, she couldn't help but crack a few jokes, which actually added a bit of humor and lightness to the heavy situation. Without saying a word, Yuanzi walked toward the car, his steps quiet but full of purpose. His mind was a total mess racing as he tried to figure out his next move, but he was just filled with torment and anxiety because he had no idea what was coming and he didn't know the right way to play his cards. In this messed up situation, Gwenya assured him that the boss would for sure find some useful information. And all she could do was wish him good luck, seeing the mix of determination and tension on his face before the mission. As he waited, our hero looked totally down in the dumps, completely lost in his own head. He wasn't even listening to what was going on around him, feeling deeply exhausted and just confused by the whole situation. The office was completely silent. Only the dim light from the lamps shone through the windows of the massive building. This created a bubble of calm, a total escape from the noise of the city down below. The employees were diligently and quietly handling their tasks at their workstations, focusing on reviewing a mountain of documents and staring at their computer screens. No one dared to break the overall atmosphere of quiet concentration. Gwenya was carefully noting down important information on a sheet of paper. She framed every word with care, making sure she didn't forget a single thing. Her goal was to create a file that was precise and easy to understand for future use. She gave the new employee detailed instructions and also pointed out that Yuan Shi Tianjun could potentially be drawn to a woman from a different faction. She explained every nuance and the possible consequences of such actions in detail. The recruiter stayed silent, completely submerged in her own thoughts. She was mulling over past events and all the possible options for the future, lost in a deep reflection. That took up all her attention and consciousness. Her book was open to the page about the second detachment. The pages turned carefully under her fingers. Her gaze was locked on the details and important notes that might be needed in the near future. Then Gwanya asked Wang Taya how he thought the kid would be able to handle the tasks that were waiting for him, watching his reaction closely and trying to understand his true feelings. Facing the situation, he replied that the Tai Yi sect had some information about the Yulin Tunnel, but he was blunt that the chances of success were super slim. He doubted that their intel would be of any real help in getting the mission done. He said if they'd had a lot more information, they would have cleared this trial a long time ago with their own night traveler, and some extra artifacts would have significantly boosted their chances of success. The young woman wanted to find him the necessary equipment, but each item had a limited function, and they had no intel on which items would actually be useful inside the tunnel. Guanya concluded that there was a strong chance they were going to lose the boy, because without the necessary gear and precise information about the tunnel, his chances of survival were just too low. They were practically non-existent, no cap. There were two ways to get your hands on artifacts. The first was to go into the spirit world and get them there, and the second was to kill a traveler and take their items, which required extreme caution and a whole lot of strength. Both options were problematic, and if someone died in the spirit world, their items would be lost for good. This made any attempt to get artifacts incredibly risky and life-threatening. The Qingming Festival had just ended, which happens to be the same time of year the Yulin Tunnel opens. The locals were getting ready for special rituals and events tied to it. Wang Tai reported that the kid had some seriously bad luck. Circumstances had prevented him from taking advantage of the Yulin Tunnel's opening. He couldn't get the help he needed in time, and all the while the director was just sitting in his office. He's laser-focused on the documents and files mapping out the next strategic moves that could change the game for his entire department. His attention is cranked to the max, and he's glued to the messages on his phone, dissecting every word and trying to predict the fallout from the intel he's getting, trying to stay 10 steps ahead. Li Dong was giving Mr. Fu a constant play-by-play on the tests happening down in the Yulin Tunnel, breaking down every single event in excruciating detail. He laid out all the setbacks and his own observations, so the big boss would have the full picture and could make the right calls. The man straight up admitted he'd misjudged the mission and suggested they hit up the Thai sect for some extra data. But he made one thing crystal clear: they live by the White Tiger's code, which means you never ever leave your people behind. The man was dead set on saving the kid's life, carefully calculating every single step and all the potential risks to keep him safe during this ridiculously dangerous task. Besides, he couldn't afford to lose him. The kid had just joined the team, and his absence would throw a massive wrench into their whole operation and completely derail their plans and missions. Meanwhile, Yuanzi was just standing frozen in front of the apartment door, staring at the keyhole, trying to figure out his next move without causing a scene, or making a stupid. After finally getting the door open, the young man called out to his grandma that he was home, his voice steady. But his eyes were locked on her, trying to read her reaction and make sure everything was cool. The old woman shot back immediately that his cousin was also home, keeping her explanation short and calm, but you could tell she was watching the kid's reaction just as closely. The woman had no idea what in the world happened to her grandson, because he looked like he'd been dragged through hell and back. His face was ghost white. His eyes were completely exhausted, and every single move he made just screamed pain and weakness, which had her seriously worried. Yuanzi walked over to his brother and greeted him softly, his voice barely a whisper, carefully watching his brother's reaction, trying to keep his cool and not freak anyone out. His brother replied that their grandma had told him he was looking for him, speaking calmly, but with a hint of surprise in his voice, trying to figure out the real reason for this sudden visit. The young man could tell right away that his relative couldn't help him at the moment, so he just said it was nothing, no big deal. He tried to sound chill, but there was a definite hint of disappointment and sadness in his voice. His brother told him that his hands were tied when it came to the whole situation with Ibn, explaining himself with a voice full of bitterness and regret. The fact that he couldn't step in was clearly tearing him up inside. Suddenly, a girl burst out of the room, showing everyone some kind of anti-wrinkle cream. According to her, this stuff was supposed to be absolutely revolutionary. She was waving her hands around like crazy, trying her best to convince everyone how effective it was. But her brother just said he didn't need anything like that. For himself, his tone was flat and he showed zero interest, making it obvious he couldn't care less about the cream and was perfectly fine the way he was. Their grandmother, who'd been listening to their whole conversation, jokingly called the older one a big kid, letting out a soft laugh while calling him out on his grumpy attitude, which made everyone in the room crack up. She said that at 30 years old, he looked even older than his dad, and she just couldn't get it. She was like, how is this dude ever gonna find a girlfriend dripping with sarcasm and a little bit of sass? The woman was so over trying to reason with her father, so she just asked him to please not stress her out. She spoke calmly, but with a sharp edge, trying to sidestep any drama or useless tension. The man remembered thinking at the time that his friend had a whole other son, but nope, It turned out to be his grandson, and the mix-up Loki threw everyone for a loop and made them all smirk at the unexpected reveal. The guests just laughed it off and didn't add anything else, just chilling and watching the whole situation unfold, not wanting to jump into their business, leaving a kind of funny vibe hanging in the air. The brother told his grandma to just take a chill pill, then said he had work in the morning and was heading off to crash quietly, dipping out of the room to recharge for the next day and avoid any more noise. Onesie didn't even hesitate. He started asking questions about what he had overheard. He was playing it cool, but you could tell he was super curious and trying to get the full scoop. The Lord explained that 2 people had straight up vanished inside the Yulin tunnel, and they were still missing. He said the cameras caught them walking in, but no one was ever found inside, which had everyone seriously weirded out and confused. He immediately warned him not to tell a single soul about this, because the whole case was top secret, stressing that they had to be super discreet, and that any leak could have some massive consequences for literally everyone involved. Hearing this, the grandma was like, why the hell isn't that place shut down then? I mean, people went missing in there, and she was freaking out that nobody was taking real steps to stop these tragedies from happening again. Our hero figured those people might have snuck into the temple grounds, just like him, trying to work out all the different ways they could have disappeared and trying to wrap his head around what could have gone down inside that sketchy place. He was wondering if the outsiders would even be able to last 3 hours. But at the same time, he felt kind of relieved, realizing he wasn't the only one getting put through this ringer. The chief had told him before that travelers had been around for a long time, and the disappearances were tied to the spirit world, which was the only thing that explained the bizarre circumstances and all the mystery vanishings. In the Yulin tunnel, the capital city was quiet, and the sun was softly lighting up the earth, making the buildings cast long shadows and creating a peaceful, almost harmonious feeling. Over the whole city, a man was just chilling on a chair, slowly opening and closing a fan in his hand, soaking up the peace and the pleasant warmth of the sun's rays that were streaming through the window. A loyal servant approached him with some big news, walking softly and carefully, so he wouldn't break the man's vibe or pull him away from his rest. That day, the old man Olsen got a letter came in from the Fu family's son, and they were carefully passing along his news and requests, trying to make him understand just how critical and urgent this information really was. Turns out his night traveler had just cleared the first trial inside the Yulin tunnel, and now he was asking for copies of every single piece of data related to that place. He needed to prep properly and get all the intel he could to actually pass the test. The man realized the festival had just wrapped up, and the dates for the tunnel's opening lined up perfectly, which forced him to think hard. He had to figure out the connection between the celebrations and the insane danger that came with the Yulin tunnel. They were really hoping to get a dynamic new member for the night travelers, but it was a damn shame that absolutely no one could make it through the tunnel. The danger level was just way too high, and it required some next-level effort and extraordinary skills. The Elder ordered the files to be sent over since their sect had given up on even trying to pass that test a long time ago. He also asked them to remind young Fu that this wasn't just some ordinary trial. This thing was already operating on a level beyond the spirit realm, and any mistake would only make the situation 100 times worse, jacking up the risk of danger and making any future rescue mission way more complicated. Then he added his own advice, which was basically don't even think about trying to save the traveler, because there was no point in helping someone who was already a dead man walking. Any attempt would just make a bad situation even worse. An S rank was the hardest quest you could possibly get, but the Yulin tunnel, that place was especially dangerous, no cap. It completely blew past all expectations and tested even the most seasoned travelers trying to clear the trial. The Thai sect sent 2 level 1 travelers to Shanghai, and a few months back, people were gearing up to enter the tunnel. But the result, 1 traveler vanished during the very first stage of the test. Dude was just gone without a single trace or any sign of a struggle. All he left behind were some creepy notes and a feeling of impending doom for anyone who followed. The other one, he actually managed to make it back, but right after he returned, he also disappeared without a trace. And this was when both of them were seriously kitted out, rocking powerful artifacts and plenty of experience. Ever since that disaster, the Thai Council of Elders completely bailed on the idea of purifying the spirit world, admitting the risks were way too high. The losses were brutal, and there was zero real chance of success even with the most careful prep. If someone could actually manage to get further and bring back some valuable info, it would be a massive breakthrough for solving a ton of old, still unsolved problems tied to the tunnels and the spirit world. The elder also mentioned that in a few days the sect leader was gathering all the night travelers in the capital. Apparently he had a major announcement to make, one that could change the future of the sect and their mission. After saying all that, he just curtly ordered the servants to leave. He was signaling that the conversation was over, and all future actions needed to be carried out without any pointless questions. Just total and complete obedience. Later that night, the young man was in a quiet room, completely unable to sleep. His head was just spinning with obsessive thoughts, wrecking his peace and making it impossible to focus even for a second. He closed his eyes and remembered a few hours earlier, he was sitting next to his aunt just watching her play a game calmly, while the room was filled with a warm silence and a feeling of safety. The girl explained that playing horror games toughens you up mentally, slowly dialing down your fear response, and forced players to get into the nitty-gritty of monster patterns just to react in time and survive. What's more, he figured that one day he might actually wake up as a character inside the game, and that weird idea totally captivated his imagination, sparking some serious interest and low-key helping him to just chill out. Yuanzi understood that the spirit world was basically a hardcore video game. He was sure it had to have strict rules, hidden mechanics, and clear-cut consequences for every single mistake or wrong move. But just then his train of thought got completely derailed when Guanya called him, totally out of the blue, yanking him out of his own head and forcing him to snap back to reality. The kid was pretty alarmed, because he really wasn't expecting a call from her, especially not this late and at such a weird time. Any contact at this hour felt unsettling and just plain wrong. After answering the call, he learned the recruiter wanted to let him know about some files. The director had sent files with info about the tunnel. She knew that young people almost never check their emails, so she had decided to play it safe. He thanked her and promised that after he passed the test, he'd treat everyone to some good food to celebrate and cut through the tension. Our guy opened his email, logging in carefully to go over the files he'd received and get familiar with the intel his boss sent over, focusing on every last detail. The girl was still on the other end of the line, quietly listening to his answers and gauging his reactions, trying not to miss any important detail in their conversation. They sat in silence while our hero carefully read the message, slowly getting up to speed with all the information and trying not to skip over any important details in the files. Then Guanya told him to pass the test and make good on his promise to treat her, basically treating his words like a sacred vow. It put this invisible pressure on him to come through for her after he finished the task. Playing it cool, the young man promised her over the phone that he'd take care of everything, keeping his tone calm to mask his intense determination. He couldn't disappoint Guanya and was dead set on keeping his word. He then carefully set his phone down on the table, trying to focus on his next moves and map out the steps he'd need to take to pass the test. The recruiter knew they had gotten the files from the Tai sect, but she couldn't predict beforehand if these documents would actually help him out. After all, the information could be incomplete or even deliberately messed with. Yuanzi, on the other hand, had already downloaded the necessary files, carefully checking each document and getting ready to use the intel he'd gathered to ace the test and clear his first objective. Everything was written out just like it was on his own system panel, which gave him a familiar feeling and a shot of confidence, letting him get his bearings quick and plan his next moves. It then said that the main location for the test was an ancient temple from the Ming dynasty, a majestic structure that was holding on to centuries of old secrets. To all the local priests, the goddess Sandao was basically the goat, the ultimate deity they looked up to for her wisdom. And for her power, they saw her as the patron saint of rituals, knowledge, and keeping the temple's spiritual vibes in check. Back then, nobody could even confirm if this beautiful woman was real. All the legends about her were just stories, wrapped up in the mystery and that enigmatic charm of past centuries. Surviving the first 3 hours wasn't too rough, but then out of nowhere, the player got jumped by a spirit. This thing started sucking out every last drop of his life force, forcing him into a desperate fight for survival, trying to find any way out. The night travelers were struggling against the attacks of these ghostly creatures, and their only saving grace was a candle sitting in the room. This thing was the only weapon they had that could push back the dark forces, giving them a sliver of a chance to make it through the night. Anyone who reads its archives gets hit with a curse, and you can only pause it temporarily. We're talking for like 15 minutes tops. After that, it comes roaring back with a vengeance. The candle in the main hall was a special artifact designed to suppress all that evil energy. But here's the catch. Its effect completely wiped out fear from people's hearts, and anyone who sat in its light became absolutely fearless. So, in the end, the only safe spot turned out to be a massive double-edged sword. You couldn't just camp there forever, it wasn't that simple. The candle actually forced travelers to get up and explore the temple, pushing them to make some bold and decisive moves. The player was chilling in the main hall for about half an hour when he suddenly heard a cry for help. At the same time, there was this powerful roar that sounded like nothing human. He decided he had to go check things out. From the archives, Yuanzi figured out that the main hall was safe, but he had no clue that the candle was what provided the protection. To him, it seemed like the goddess Sandow herself was the charm, guarding the place with her own power. The screams were coming from the Bodhi trees, and at the same time he heard a voice calling for help. But it was a completely different sound, nothing like the roar he'd heard before, creating this unsettling, ambiguous feeling. Our hero also read that the Bodhi tree area was extremely dangerous. A bit later, a pair of red shoes straight up invited the player to a dance-off. But while they were busting a move, he couldn't remember the dance pattern, and that's when the shoes went full psycho and started chasing him down. The player barely managed to scramble back to the main hall, but not before the shoes broke 2 of his ribs. Those things had zero chill and wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. The whole reason the Sandow Temple fell into ruin was still a total mystery. The man was dead sure he was going to nail the second mission. After finishing his reading, he quietly closed the document, lost in some serious thought. He just sat there in silence, replaying every single phrase and clue he had just read over and over again. And for some reason, the word condition really stood out to him like it was a major key to the whole puzzle. He was pretty sure it was the shoes that caused the deaths of those workers. Almost all of them had severe fractures, which was a dead giveaway of the shoes' signature attack style. Yuanzi knew that thanks to his uncle, he was actually a little decent at dancing. But if even a top-tier night traveler couldn't handle it, then his own chances were looking pretty damn slim. Suddenly, a bunch of worrying thoughts started crashing into his mind, popping up out of nowhere and tangling together. This whole situation forced him to put his brain into overdrive, thinking through every hidden detail and all the ways this could go sideways. The night traveler even pointed out that his own moves were ridiculously hard to memorize. But then he realized the crazy part. His constant headaches were actually because his memory was just too damn good. Meanwhile, Guanja was just chilling at home, taking a hot bath and soaking up the peace and quiet, when all of a sudden her phone starts blaring, completely killing the mood. After she answers, she checks the screen and sees the call is from some young dude. She figures he's probably already devoured the whole file and is now scrambling to get in touch with her. Yuanzi immediately jumps in with a question about the so-called conditional item. Because honestly, he was completely in the dark and needed her to break it down for him so he could get a grip on what was happening. So she starts laying it all out, explaining that in the spirit world, there are these artifacts that their organization sorts into 3 main types: the valuable items, the conditional items, and a third type that's way above her pay grade. But at the end of the day, all of them are used to pull off different important jobs. However, it's a known fact that the conditional items are a whole different level of difficult to control, and because they're so rare, their actual value is way higher than any of the other artifacts. Those red shoes mentioned in the file are almost definitely one of these items, and if our boy accepts the invitation and manages to fulfill its special condition, he could get total control over them. The girl then adds a little warning, though, saying that if it were her, she wouldn't even think about trying to get her hands on a conditional item. Hearing this, our hero cautiously asks if he can bring his meds with him for some backup. She replies that other than the clothes he's wearing, he can't bring a single thing with him, and thinks it's a better bet to take the meds beforehand to be prepared for anything. And that's when it hits him, he could totally just keep the pills in his mouth. He knew, however, that to pull this off, he'd have to take a huge risk and basically bet his own life on it. Wania tells the young man to watch his back, adding that Scorpios have some crazy luck working for them that day, which could totally work in his favor. At the same time, the countdown timer shows our player only has 5 minutes left. He uses those last few minutes to make some rapid-fire decisions, feeling a mix of intense pressure and a rush of excitement. He gets suited up and gathers all the gear he needs, carefully going over every item, making damn sure he isn't forgetting anything. This time around, he's actually feeling a little bit hyped for what's coming. On the outside, our boy was totally prepared, because he knew his destination this time, and had already meticulously checked his outfit and equipment. This meant he could push forward confidently, with zero unnecessary delays holding him back. The young man locks his bedroom door, giving it a careful check, just in case, making sure there would be absolutely no distractions that could mess with his mission. With a minute left on the clock, our hero finally swallows the pills. He's sticking to the script, every action filled with a crazy amount of tension and raw resolve. Just like that, the spirit world opens up, and he's prompted to step into the Yulin Tunnel. His primary mission: explore this freaky, unfamiliar world. But by the end, he'd only managed to complete 20% of his exploration. He's gradually getting the hang of his new environment. Then a new window popped up, wishing the player good luck. It was flashing with bright colors, giving him this magical boost of confidence, right before his tough journey kicked off. After soaking in all the info he was given, Yuanzi got ready to teleport out. He double-checked his gear and focused his mind, feeling a mix of hype and pure determination. Not even a minute later, he popped into the main hall. Feeling a little dizzy, his eyes immediately darted around the area, searching for anything familiar. Our boy stayed quiet, just processing the fact that he was back in a place that felt both familiar and kinda sketchy. It was giving him some seriously mixed vibes of surprise and anxiety as he spat the pills out into his hand. He realized his big brain plan actually worked, and a wave of pure joy and relief washed over him because his crafty strategy totally paid off. Just like he'd hoped, and it was all thanks to these pills. Now he could finally tackle the Red Shoes quest, since they had some OP special properties that let him mess with the world around him, letting him inch closer and closer to his final objective. Tucking them safely into his pocket, Yuanzi realized that in this world, the sun literally never comes up. He was trapped in a constant state of twilight, and the whole vibe was just endless mystery and anxiety. He told himself he had to start treating this place like it was a video game, carefully scanning every single corner in detail so he wouldn't miss any crucial clues or items. Our guy quickly figured out he could touch certain objects to pull up their descriptions. So he started carefully checking out every item, slowly piecing together the info he needed to clear the quest. He went for the candle. On his first run, he had just touched it without a second thought, with no clue it was actually a key artifact. Luckily, this time he'd been sent a whole file explaining its purpose and properties before he started. Yuanzi decided his first move was to hang back in the hall for now, and then he'd scout out the backyard, trying to uncover every hidden corner and secret this sketchy place was hiding. There was a catch though: each trip outside couldn't last more than 15 minutes. Any longer, and a spirit would latch on to him. Those pills were definitely his trump card for the Red Shoe trial. All this time, our boy could have been prepping hard, but the problem was the fear was so overwhelming, it was drowning out everything else, completely freezing his resolve. It forced him to be way more cautious than he wanted to be. Since he had already explored the central courtyard, he decided to head towards the east one, next carefully checking every corner and trying to spot any unusual details or clues that might be out of place. If he just chilled in the main hall, he'd literally starve to death, and the longer he waited, the worse his condition would get, threatening him with a total loss of strength and control over the whole situation. So he finally decided to just man up and push forward, determined to conquer his inner fear and explore the new secrets that were waiting for him. Everything around him was dark and creepy as hell, and every little noise echoed, forcing him to listen closely. He strained his ears for the slightest movement in the shadows. Our hero moved silently down the paths, cautiously looking all around him, trying to spot the tiniest details and dodge any dangers that might be lurking in the pitch-black darkness. The only light came from the stars sprinkled across the sky, which cast a faint glow on the paths below, and created this bone-chilling silent atmosphere all around our hero. Yuanzi made his way across a bridge, and underneath it was just murky, dark water. He walked super carefully so he wouldn't fall in, all while listening to some faint, sketchy noise coming up from the depths below. He was just walking along totally zoned out, but at the same time his senses were on high alert, trying to catch any sound that spelled trouble, or anything that might give him a clue about this world. The info he had mentioned, the Bodian tree right in front of him, was supposed to be dangerous, but honestly, at first glance, it just looked like a regular old tree chilling with its branches spread out under the night sky. Our boy figured that if he checked out the Bodian tree, he could probably make way better time. So he crept closer, super careful, scanning for any hint of a threat or some hidden opportunity. That's when this creepy old well just materialized in front of him. Its dark depths were shimmering with a tiny bit of light, looking like it was hiding some ancient secrets and serious danger. He knew that in any horror game, a setup like this is a major red flag. So he decided to just go around it, giving the well a wide berth to dodge any traps or whatever was lurking nearby. Just as Yuanzi took another step, he heard a sickening crack that made him freeze in his tracks. He strained his ears, listening hard into the darkness all around him. He realized instantly he'd just snapped a bone under his foot. A white-hot flash of pain shot through his entire body, making him gasp and desperately flail for something to hold on to so he wouldn't go down. Then when he glanced around, he spotted another worker's skeleton just lying there, pathetically in the rubble. It was a grim reminder of all the unknown dangers and trials this place held. Honestly, though, they didn't really scare him anymore. He'd seen so many around here that the skeletons were starting to feel like just another part of the messed up scenery. Creepy as it was, our guy analyzed its posture and how well it was preserved, and he figured someone must have straight up snapped its neck. He couldn't help but feel a little chill thinking about the sheer brutality of the past that stained this place. On this place, after checking it out, the big question on his mind was, who could have done something like this? And our boy spent a good while running through all the possible scenarios, trying to wrap his head around the motives and the power of whoever was behind it all. He sat down quietly in front of the skeleton, trying to process everything. He carefully studied its position, the scraps of clothing and everything around it, trying to piece together what happened. When all of a sudden a voice called out to Yuanzi from right behind him. He whipped around, listening intently, trying to pinpoint where the voice came from. Without a second thought, our guy pulled the artifact from his pocket, holding it carefully in his hands. He was ready to use it at the first sign of trouble, or to defend himself from whatever that mysterious voice was. The mirror materialized in his hand, and with it, he could see what was going on behind his back. He watched every movement super closely, catching even the slightest shift in the darkness. At first, the reflection just showed this weird shapeless black blob right behind him that was slowly changing its form. It was seriously putting him on edge, making him super vigilant. Then it started to morph into the shape of a ghostly girl. Her hair was so long it seemed to swirl around her like it was caught in some invisible wind, creating this freaky, mysterious vibe around her. This thing pointed a finger right at him and ordered him to come closer, which sent a wave of fear through Yuanzi, but also this weirdly powerful urge to obey. Our guy instantly knew it was Sadako's ghost and screamed his lungs out, an icy chill shooting right down his spine. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to break free. He absolutely bolted towards a random house he spotted in the distance. Fueled by pure panic and adrenaline, he dodged every obstacle, the only sound being the echo of his own frantic footsteps in the darkness. Spotting a crack in the roof, he saw his chance, carefully climbing up and clinging to the ledge. He didn't want to risk falling into the pitch-black building. Once inside, the kid collapsed, realizing he'd finally shaken his pursuer. A wave of relief washed over him, even though his heart was still beating out of his chest from the sheer terror. The Night Traveler's journal didn't have any specific notes on this part, but he did mention that turning back was a no-go. It wasn't exactly forbidden, just straight up impossible. He was also pretty sure that the ghost had crawled out of that well. Yuanzi figured that once he was back on the main path, nothing could possibly threaten him. After all, he'd escaped that nightmare zone and put some serious distance between himself and the ghost. He finally let out a breath. Bruh, the kid was just exhausted and wanted nothing more than to get home ASAP. He was desperate to be back somewhere safe and familiar after all the insane crap he'd just been through. So, he pushed forward cautiously, scanning his surroundings with a hawk's eye, trying not to miss a single clue that could help him crack the mysteries of this freaky place. That's when he came face to face with a massive door. It was no joke, totally towering over him and giving off some seriously mysterious vibes. It made Yuanzi pause, forcing him to wonder what the hell was waiting for him on the other side. He reached out and put his shoulder into the heavy doors, feeling they were built like a tank and wouldn't budge easily. But slowly, they started to give way, groaning as they opened into the pitch blackness. As the gap widened, a dark shape appeared behind them. It was moving, but just barely, almost too subtle to see. Yuanzi's anxiety immediately shot through the roof. The kid instantly recoiled in shock, feeling a fresh jolt of adrenaline and a slight tremor in his hands as he tried to process what he was seeing. He had no clue what that thing was or if it was about to end him, so he just froze right there on the spot, listening intently and trying to pick up on any sign of a threat or danger. But then when his vision cleared a second later, our traveler peered inside the room, carefully scanning the space and trying to make out any details or clues hiding in the surrounding darkness.